For those who have been following same scholars with the women following and maybe reading even the same articles and same books, you're familiar with this very late 19th century German scholar called Hermann Gunkel, who wrote in 1895 book on chaos, which is translated in English. It's called Creation and Chaos in the Primeval Era and the Eschaton. In this book, he describes a conflict between Yahweh and Leviathan or Rahab, which is basically described as these ancient serpents in the sea. And Herman taught that Old Testament borrowed from the Babylonian myth. Now, before I mention what some other more modern scholars are saying regarding what he said, so far, are we hitting some important points at the beginning of Genesis 1? Could we say, because you mentioned very well that a lot of Genesis and the Old Testament was written for the sense of being polemical, correcting and defending the faith and correcting it against pagan myths. So when we check Hermann Gunkel's book, and when we see that he used to believe that Old Testament borrowed heavily from Babylonian mythology. What is your theological opinion on this?
Well, he was working with what he had. If you read his work, which was, I forget what year it was fairly recently translated into English, so you can go and read this yourself. He has some really interesting ideas that I definitely don't agree with, especially when he gets to connecting it with Revelation. But it's kind of a difference in the way you're interpreting and thinking about things. The reason that we bring up the term Chaoskampf, which is the German term for what we're talking about, like the reason you have that German term is that a lot of our theology is still very embedded in the scholarship of Germany, who kind of led the way in the 18th century for a lot of these ideas. So you can get his book, and a lot of it is still really relevant to the study. But he didn't have all of the information we have today. So what he had fairly recently in his time were discovered the Babylonian myths. And there are very much those parallels between the Bible and the myths of Babylon. And of course, when you think about Babylon in the chronology of time in its relationship to Israel, what we're thinking of is the time of the exile, basically. Just before that and just after that, and all around there. So that's kind of a bit late, but so what he had was that kind of material. In 1928, they found a whole slew of texts from Ugarit, which is in Canaan. So that's a city that's north of Israel, and they have the myth there too. So this is not the stuff that Hermann Gunkel was working with. He didn't know anything about all of those kinds of texts. So and I think that the fact that we see the theme, and those texts from Ugarit are demonstrably earlier because of the time periods that they lived in and the time periods that they reigned in. So we have the myth that goes from that time all the way up to the exile. So it's very much a long distance kind of an idea that really lasted the test of time. So I wouldn't just toss out his ideas and his scholarship willy-nilly, because it's very much connected. But we need to realize that we're always learning more, and we're always seeing that, oh, what we had before wasn't the whole picture. So I definitely still recommend reading it if you're interested in this topic. Like I said, once he gets to Revelation, he has some really weird ideas of the provenance of Revelation, but in any case, you can definitely dig into his Old Testament studies and really see a lot of the connections that we would still be making today with the theme of chaos.